Good afternoon and welcome all of you for this Faculty Development Program Session 11 uh, from OSGU. And I, Dr. Shobna Podar, Dean Corporate Relations Training and Development and Professor Management, welcome all of you from the entire OSGU family for this session 11, under the theme under the sub-theme Innovation Trend in Research, and the topic of today's is Evolving Trend in Research. Our resource person is Dr. Anuja Pandey, Associate Professor, Center for Management Education, All India Management Association, Delhi. So, Dr. Anuja Pandey is a head of All India Management Association, Case Research Center, ICRC. She is a faculty trainer, consultant, and researcher. Dr. Anuja is managing editor of IMA's Journal of Management and Research, AJMR. Dr. Pandey is faculty in charge of IMA's courses in business analytics and digital marketing and analytics. Her teaching experience is in the area of marketing management, consumer behavior, advertising, and brand management, digital marketing, sales and distribution, marketing research, services marketing, international marketing, communication. She has published more than 21 papers in international and national journals. She has authored 3 books. She has presented several research papers in international and national conferences. She has guided 3 PhD students in prestigious IMA AMU program. So, welcome, ma'am, on board for this wonderful topic of evolving trend in research. And over to you, ma'am, for the same.
Thank you, Dr. Shobna. I hope all of you can hear me. A very, very warm welcome to all of you here to this wonderful FDP. And I can see the hard work of the management team of Sterling University here to shape up this whole FDP, which when I looked into the structure, I could find a lot of things which have been covered in this FTB are quite unique in a sense that they are towards self development of a faculty. And I thought that maybe, I mean, when I was given this invitation, I thought that it is a normal research method kind of a FTP, and probably we would have people wanting to do some kind of research to be there, but I can see a larger audience is also not just focused on research, but they're also looking for self evolution as a faculty and a career into faculty side. So I would try to really talk about little bit of research and little bit onto the aspect as to how you evolve yourself as a faculty typically when you are teaching into the population which is very, very dynamic today. So I'm sure a lot of you would agree with me that the world that we are teaching is very, very different. And as I can see, so many of you who have joined in and have been wishing a good afternoon. I think it's a very, very good afternoon to all of you. This world has the world that we are into, which we are teaching. We are facing a lot of new challenges, probably a lot of challenges which were not there maybe some time ago. Maybe 2 years back, we never faced such kind of challenges, but now we are in a situation where probably we have to really see what can be the best thing to do, how we really cope up with coping up with these challenges. So let me very quickly take you to what I exactly want to discuss. I would want to focus today on 2 aspects. I hope you can all see my screen. If my screen is visible, just type in a yes. That would give me a confidence that I am there onto the right track.
Yes, it is very much visible.
Right. So, what actually what we are talking about is 2 aspects of the trends which are evolving in research today. Research is when it comes to research we have all been doing. A lot of you who have joined us today would be PhDs into your area, and I'm sure have got enough of the understanding as to how this whole concept of research has to be looked into. But what we are actually talking today is where exactly is the pain area of research. We will be talking a little bit on the pain area of research, and we'll talk about what are the emerging trends. And before I talk about the pain areas and the emerging trend, let me just very clearly try to understand the population. How many of you have published research papers in last 2 years? Very quickly, those who have published research papers in last 2 years, any journal, just type in yes. Anybody who has published a paper in last 2 years in any of the journal, please type in yes. Okay, Dr. Sunil Kumar, great sir. Fizal, Dr. Murmur, very Tapti Saha, very nice, very nice. And my great Dr. Sunanda. So, and how many of you have published something like a case study? Those of you who have published case studies, put in just a Y there. That would help me to differentiate. Those who have published case studies. Those who have published case studies, put in a Y there. Great. So I believe Dr. Rajaram Lamba and Dr. Ritu are the ones who have published some case studies there. So what I would try to talk about today is the emerging trend in terms of the research publication, typically related to the research papers, and also we'll talk about something related to cases, because I could see into your the agenda a lot of things have been talked about research. I think in the morning session also we talked about the mixed method research. I would talk here a little onto what we talk about as the concept of using up case studies into your teaching and writing cases which can be published in journal and can be added to your faculty scores when we go in for our annual appraisal systems. So typically, most of us, I mean, when it as a faculty, there are two ways by which we would be showing our academic achievement. One is by writing up some of the research paper, and second is writing up cases. I will take both of them, and but I'll start something with cases. Why I talk about cases? Because as you could have seen in my profile, I am heading up India Case Research Center, which we had set up at IMA in 2018, and with the objective that we want Indian faculties to be using more of the case studies into their classroom. Because I'm sure you all would have realized that the student population that we are teaching today, it's really very difficult to get a engagement with the student, because probably these students are very different from the students we were teaching couple of years ago. Their engagement levels are very low. At the same time, they would really want something which is happening in the real life to be projected. And that's the reason why cases have become quite popular as a way to teach among the B schools and also the university department. Because I believe a lot of you today who have joined us today are some are the people who belong to university departments. Maybe this is from Om Sterling University or a number of other university which are now running MBA programs. You might have joined us from there. So what we are actually looking for, cases have been very effective way to teach, and I'm sure a lot of you know about it and have practiced about it. I'll just re-emphasize a little bit more onto as to why we consider this whole concept of teaching through cases very valuable. Just one sec. When we talk about cases, we have we if this is a very effective tool to create a kind of a situation in a classroom where probably the faculty, the students all are into a same context where they can really practice something which we call as their decision making, or maybe when it comes to their understanding of a problem. So a lot of things can be done with cases, and cases have been very very popular with a subject like law, and now in management. And I think most of the premier B schools have always been teaching through cases, because when you look into management is more of a subject which is a practice oriented subject, where we have when we look into every subject, there would be certain theories, certain models. Most of these models and most of these theories have emerged from the practitioner's perspective. Practitioners have practiced certain things, and from these certain things we have evaluated certain theories, and we have also evaluated certain huh. So what we have also done is we have evaluated certain theories, and we have also evaluated certain concepts which can be converted in form of models. And when it comes to the models, this is what we want to. When you look into 80% of our management teaching, we try to relate some of the model with some kind of practice there. So that is how the evolution of the cases in management happened. We talked about what industries talking about doing, and probably we started looking into what can be the best way you can solve a problem. So over a period of time, these concepts of management which we were talking about, a lot of cases were written. And what we also find was a case has become a very very important tool into the learning journey of a student. And it is not just a learning journey for a student, but also the case author, the faculty who is writing up the case. Because generally what we have seen is the case would be a description, account of description about a situation. There would be sequence of events which would actually be raising lot of issues, or would be raising lot of problems which needs some kind of analysis and some kind of solution. And generally, when we're talking about situations, these situations would be a lot descriptive type, but they would also have lot of data points built in together. So that is where we try to really see to it that what all can be drawn from a situation, which helps us to clearly identify a problem, and from a problem look into the alternatives, and from the alternatives take up the best solution. So this is where generally the case studies becomes very very important from a perspective that probably in a management school, what are we trying to do. I'm sure you would all have your takes on it, but can few of you help me to understand that what do we want to achieve through a management education? I would like if you can just type in your options there. What do you want to achieve through a management education? When you are teaching a student, what do you want him to really excel into? What are the key skills that you want him to be to develop into him? Yes, I'll make it a full screen in few minutes. Just wanting to see your responses there. So I hope you have all understood my question. What are the key skills that you want to develop into a student when you are when we are running a management course? Do we want to develop a communication skill with them? I'm just giving you some hints so that I can get a response from you all. Do we want to develop communication skill? Do we want to develop problem solving skill? Do we want them to understand data interpretation? What do we want our students, what are the skills that we want our students to have with this course? Leadership quality, great. Dr. Murmu, great. Okay. Crescent College, I don't know the faculty there. Yes, leadership skill, okay. Okay. What, apart from leadership, what exactly, what else do we want them to develop? Communication skill, analytical, technical, interpersonal skill, great. Great. So when you look into these, okay, that was Mohammed Faiz from Crescent College. Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. Thanks for participating in this, putting up your things there. I would now like to see and tell you that when we are talking about are very, very strong from two aspects. One is from the aspect that the case is a complete learning journey for a student. Secondly, writing a case is a very, very rewarding journey for any faculty member. And I'm sure a lot of you would have written up cases. And when we talk about cases, there are a lot of various type of cases which you would have across or you would have heard. I'm here talking about teaching cases. There are also research cases, but I'm not talking about research cases as of now. I'll talk it in the later part of my discussion. So, what we are trying to focus here is the teaching cases. And when it comes to teaching cases are primarily, we say, these have to be built up within your curriculum that you are teaching. You as a faculty, you are there to teach a subject. In the subject you have to teach some of the concepts, and from in the concepts you have to see to it that whether I can teach this concept better through cases. Why? Because maybe this case, when I teach this topic through a case, it has got a more learning happening through case. Why? Because a student is getting involved to a particular situation, and from this situation he is able to develop the linkages with sub concepts. At the same time, it is triggering him to an action, and he is trying to come into a protagonist position, try to analyze situation from various perspective and trying to really find out solutions for it. And that is where your learning, whatever you wanted to teach, whatever concept you wanted to teach, becomes really enhanced. Why? Because this is the time where a student is getting highest level of engagement, and ideally this is what we want in our class to happen. And this is something which we are lacking most of the time, because as a faculty I would always go prepared in my classroom. I would have my set of ppts, I would have my set of lecture notes which I want to share with my student, but I am not sure whether he is really getting up what I wanted to teach. And but when I'm using a case method, probably I am forcing him to come into the situation, forcing him to really get engaged with it. And if he becomes excited about it, he's himself going to give you a lot of indications as to what he's learning there. So that way a case is a very, very rewarding activity for a student, because then he actually starts understanding the problem, his comprehension of a problem, his identification of a problem, his wording of a problem starts appearing. What we have seen in our Indian student is that we generally have a one-sided approach of teaching. We do not have participant-centered learning. So what happens? We might finish off our topic, but the outcome of our teaching would only be reflected through the assessments that we would be doing. So that is generally the end term examination that we would be doing. And by that time, it is too late to really go back to the student and tell him, hey, you haven't understood the concept well, you need to understand it like this. That would be too late. But if you are using something like a case in a classroom, you get to know what exactly are the students getting. And generally, we have seen with various experiments that 80% of the class, most of even in the cases, 80% of the class would be silent in our first attempt. But if we start using cases quite often, I mean, for every now and then we start using up, a lot of other students starts getting opportunity or have the confidence to speak, because they would have realized that the point that they wanted to make in their last case discussion is something which the best of the students were doing. So they start getting up the confidence that they are moving into the right direction, and now they start speaking up. And as a faculty, it is also my responsibility to make sure that every student in my class learns. It is not just those top 20 percentile of the students who would be always performing well, who would always learn in my class. But my as a faculty, my job is to make sure that everybody who's there in my class understands it. And that is where, to get into that level of engagement with the student, I need to really bring him to a speaking level. Motivating him to speak, correct or incorrect, that is a secondary thing. We can always, once a person starts speaking, we can always tell him that this is the way that your thought process should be built up. But if we are not really moving on to making him to understand that what is the real issue, real concept, real challenge, he would not be able to figure out the problems. And that is what happens with most of our students, that when they go to industry, what the challenge that they face is they are very, very theoretical. Why? Because they haven't really given a hands-on experience to really figure out the problem. Start questioning. Is the information enough? No, it is not enough. I want more information. So, what type of information? These are the questions which a student should be asking into the classroom. And then, generally, when we look into the whole activity, I mean, once you take up a conscious decision that you will be using lot many cases in your classroom, and case is not just an activity to fill the gap when I, as a faculty, I am not prepared, and I believe that I would today, I don't have my notes ready, so I would give a case to a class, ये class किसी तरह से खत्म हो जाए. No, that is not the right way to think about it. Cases are very, very important tool to enhance your capability to make student or the participants learn in the class. At the same time, cases are very, very strong tool for you as a faculty to learn, especially when you are writing up cases. So generally, we say that the journey to understand the research that we talked about in the beginning, there can be two ways to look into it. That either you write your own cases, or you teach through the cases which are developed by other people. Generally, as a fresher, we always recommend that you start your journey by using some good cases into your classroom. These cases from can be from any place. It can be from any of the good journal. It could be the cases which are part of your textbook. These cases could be the opening snippet which is there generally in any of the standard textbook. It could be the end chapter case study, or it could be a case study which you have pulled in or purchased it from any of the case center. But whenever you are trying to use cases in your classroom, please look into your learners' experience, seniority, and dedication. Because again, it's a very, very engaging activity, but at the same time, you need to be very, very careful as to what type of cases you would be using. Because when you look into a student, I'm typically imagining that most of you would be teaching into a graduate or a postgraduate program. So when you look into a graduate level understanding and a postgraduate level understanding, their level of understanding might be very different. A graduate may, and some of the time, these undergraduates are very, very smart people. They might really might not have the theoretical understanding of the concept, but they would come up with very great solutions. So we have to be really very careful as to what type of cases we use. At the same time, your case should be something which engages him to read. The another issue which generally our students, where we are facing, is the lack of attention span and lack of reading ability. And this is something which has been taken care when we start using case studies into the class. So maybe smaller case study, a one page, 1.5 page case study given within the classroom, which can be read in another 10 minutes or maybe 12 minutes, is something which we recommend. And why we recommend? Because generally that is the level of uh, attention span which our kids have today. It might even be lesser to that, and that is the reason why we say that it is not always important that your case should be something which is a written text case. It can be something which can be a multimedia case, or maybe a text and a video clip linked together. And that is where you are keeping in mind what really interests your learners. The topic of the case is also very important, and we say a lot of time when we are designing our curriculum, when we are looking into the curriculum, these are very standard activities that we have. But the flexibility as a faculty that we have is what case I would be picking up, which organization, what issue, how does this really excite my student to read. So you need to be very contextual on it, and probably the something which is happening in their lives, or some of the brands or some of the organizations which have come into the news are the things which you need to really incorporate into your teaching, because that is where your engagement level of student increases. Because he starts feeling he is connecting to what is happening into the real world, what is happening into the business world, what are the things being talked about in various debates. And then he starts building up his own idea, and he starts putting up his point. So this situation is also very important, and the choice of the case that you're talking about. And the third very important thing is to be kept in mind when you're using up cases for to teach, is your knowledge of experience and your expertise. Because when you look into the students that we are teaching, these are students who are very smart student. These might not be the one who are top 20 percentile of India, but they might be into the middle segment. They might not be academically very brilliant, but they are very smart student, and they learn a lot of things, and they get a lot of other information. And a lot of time they could really pull you into a classroom if you're not prepared. So case is something which you should go with very good preparation, because you are not able to control on and keep the student focused only to your topic or your specialization area. Student would always divert into other areas, and that is why we say a very comprehensive understanding of management concepts, or maybe whatever discipline in which you are using up case, is very important. Because this, once you have triggered the learning in a student, he would always have questions which are very divergent, which might deviate from your main topic. As a faculty, I can't stop him to learn. I can't say him, no, don't ask me this question. I have to be very careful that, okay, this comes into my domain and I have a strong understanding of it, I would be able to answer it, I would answer it. There would be some questions which are beyond my domain, but I believe that they need to be addressed, I would address. And there would be certain questions which would be asked which are beyond my domain. I would always say that, hey student, I am not from this particular specialization area, and I'm not going to really talk about it, because that I would not be able to do the justice. So this is something which where a lot of understanding as or maturity as a faculty is needed. Now, when we look into the cases, we say there are multiple format of cases. There would be text cases, the cases which we generally use for class discussion, and these are to can be of multiple formats. And what we have actually seen is the highest level of engagements are coming from the cases which are generally multimedia cases. It could be a audio clipping. A podcast is something which is now a in thing for most of our students. It could be a pre-class podcast which has been sent to their groups, so that they read it or they listen to it while coming to the classroom. It could be a video clipping, or it could be something which is animated, or it could even be a very strong text written. So multimedia is something which we are now looking into. Various format of cases and multimedia cases have become very very important in the classroom discussions. Anybody who has any question till now, or anything that you want me to focus, just let me know, so that I can come back and maybe I can see my screen and see what are the chats going on. I hope I am into moving into the right direction in terms of what was expected out of the what you are having expectation. If you have any questions here, please drop in your question, or if you have an observation, please drop in your observation. So now let me talk about a little bit of why I'm emphasizing on this cases, and my emphasis on the case is based on lot of things that have been already said in about cases. I would really talk about little more onto how the journey that we are talking about, the learning, teaching, learning pedagogy, how it is going to change. And I'm then going to focus on to what we call as developing or writing your own cases. So you would have realized, if you look into my slide here, you would have realized that a couple of years ago our general teaching was more or less a lecture based teaching. And then we could add up some of the examples, and these examples were related to various organization or various other things by which we were trying to explain this phenomena. But what we also have seen is a flipped classroom, where maybe the theoretical part of it is something which a student would be doing on his own. As a faculty, I am a mentor into the course. I'm just making sure that the student learns what he needs to learn into a subject, and I'm not really teaching the core of the subject. That is something he's doing through his own, or we have created already recorded sessions for it to understand the core. Now I'm taking him to a next level of his understanding, where he understands the concepts, but he's trying to look into the application of the concepts. So what I have done, I have flipped the classroom. Theory I have either shared in form of a text, or a textbook, or maybe class notes, or I have recorded the sessions around it. And when I am in a live session, I am in face to face interaction with my student. This is where I am now trying to have a discussion around it. To have that kind of discussion, I may use something which I call as a scenario building or a case based thing. Once I have reached to this particular level, I can push my student to something like a problem solving, and probably move towards a project based learning. So generally, when we are designing as a faculty member, when we design our curriculum, we try to really see that how the journey of a student would be. First semester, he's been taught more of the theories and few of the cases. Second semester onwards, we start infusing up cases into the classroom. Third semester, which is generally a specialization subject, we have tried to overload the subject with lot of case studies. By fourth semester, student is very very mature, and he wants to look into having a comprehensive picture. I'm talking about typical management school scenario. He starts looking into a very very comprehensive picture, and he has multiple areas in which his knowledge has to be imparted, or information is coming, and he tries to make up a holistic picture. And that's where your case based teaching starts happening. So a lot of institutions which are really very very matured have matured to a level where most of their teaching is something which is case based, and most of the teaching is something which is related to project based. So that is where the problem solving approach of a person comes in, and his in learning into this activity is something which is then understood and emphasized. So this is where generally the pattern of learning emerges, and you do a lot of, I mean, this whole use of cases are some of the things where we have lot of engagements. Student generally may learn do a collaborative learning. They would learn a lot of things, not only from the faculty but from their own group of people in which they are interacting. And here, our role as a faculty member is to shape up their discussions. When we do this activity, our own learning increases tremendously, because every case that you are using in a classroom, would have a different set of audience every semester or every time you move on to different sections of your own program. So you would feel that every student group has its own take onto a case, and you would be faced with an altogether different teaching challenge, and that gives you lot of maturity to learn. And believe me, I have been teaching up at IMA for last 15 years. We teach with uh, both the very very different profile of the students in our classroom. We have students who are very very fresher, I mean completely fresher, I would say, less than 1 or 2 years of experience, who come to our classroom. And we also have people who come to us with 15 to 20 years experience. When I started teaching at IMA, I was at the some of the time I was teaching to people who were almost twice as senior as to me in my academic discipline. And from there I could realize that a lot of time it is not easy to teach these senior executives, because they, some of the time they would laugh at our management concepts, and they would say that these are not something which is actually applied into the real life situation. And this is one of the challenge which we have been always facing, and that is why as a faculty, then I, when we were facing up these challenges, we tried to understand that okay, if we are not connecting with industry problem, if we are not teaching something which is relevant for industry, so how do I really work on something more relevant, which is more realistic, and I become a better teacher as such. So that was the time when we started visiting out the industries, and start when we visited industry, a lot of other scenarios open to us. And the learning that we had from industry, we could find that they can be very easily converted into case studies, or it could be converted into research articles. Case studies are generally very very easy for anybody to understand and apply. Reason is that cases generally, I mean, would have a scenario which are very I mean easy to understand, you can relate to it. From those case scenarios you can probably look in and see what are the established theories behind it. So as a faculty member, when we are visiting up these industry, we get a lot of live situations there. And when we look into deeply look into these live situations, and when we interact with people, a lot of understanding actually comes in. And when we go back to our classrooms, we find that a lot of theories which are around it need to be looked from a little different perspective. These theories are very very relevant, but they need to be understood, or have to be taught from a very different perspective. And probably we need to do what we call as a complete flipped learning, where we put up a scenario and we say that how are you going to solve a problem, and generally student by his own deductions actually end up developing some of the models which were already accepted, the models in management. And that is the time where the real approval of our learning comes in, that okay, yes, we have done a right thing. Ultimately student was able to discover this model, relate the situation, discover this model, and discover this model was again tested and validated into the industry situation. Or it might be that this model needs a little bit of modification. So that is where we are now seeing a lot of old management models being modified. So and these are all very very practical things. And management, when it comes to management, probably management is one area, or management teaching is one area which is very very practical. I mean, I don't really see something where what we teach and practice cannot be really married to each other. There is no other discipline which can be so practical apart from those law and medical sciences, which are very, very practical. Again, this is something which is very, very practical, and probably if we do a little bit of our job, we can convert or we can make sure that whatever has been said about management teaching, the criticisms that we have seen into the management teaching, where people have talked that we do not teach something which is actually being practiced into the industry, we would be able to overcome that. So this is what I thought I would just put up one pinch of salt onto what we or I would want you to trigger your thought process by putting up this ingredient into you, that this is the time you need to evolve yourself as a faculty member. You have been teaching for so long, now it is the time to start writing cases. And this is where the new area of research comes in. When I say new area of research, this is where you are actually getting up a live the research situation for yourself. When I say live research situation, when you go think about writing a case, I we always recommend, do not, I mean, the first stage of writing a case is something where we do a desk research. So generally we get a lot of information about the organization, about the scenarios, from the information which is available on internet, or maybe books, journal, and other things. That is where we have actually develop a interest into a particular situation, a particular topic, particular industry. And this is the time where, if our interests are right, this is the time where we need to build up, and we need to build up, probe more onto it, and probably make first draft of what we want to write about our organization. But our real learning would come when we go to the organization, and that is why we have always, as a body at All India Management Association, we have been talking about a lot of these things into our India Case Research Center, and we are trying to really make sure that most of the people who join us become part of our journey, really avail this learning experience. Why? Because the cases are not just stories. Cases would always have some kind of relevant issue, a problem which needs your attention. And if it is a problem, you need to understand why is it a problem. And that is why we say that you when you start reaching out to the industry, you actually understand the real problem. A lot of time, people come up with cases which are generally is what is being said into a newspaper, but that might not be a real issue. I would tell you a situation here. One of my colleague who joined us, our case research center in this journey, wanted to write on Beti Bachao Beti Padhao Abhiyan, and she said she wanted to write the case around it. And why she wanted to write the case? Because she was a teacher of communication, and also coming with a background where she was also about to teach a course which was related to policy. So she saw that probably Beti Bachao Beti Padhao Abhiyan would be a very good case study. She wrote the case, she submitted the case to us. But when we looked into a case, we could find that most of the information within the case are something which are already available on internet. And what is there which the faculty is bringing on board. And then we made her understand, though, no, this is a very very big problem. I mean, this is this government policy has come up after understanding the problem behind it. Have we really made a student understand why this policy came into picture? The gender diversity, gender ratio in India is such in such a critical position at this point in time, that if we do not really work on it, we it would be really too late. Another very important issue is to understand that education system in India is at a very challenging time. When we talk about education system, we have got, first, people do not really send their kids to schools in villages. Secondly, if they send their male kids to the village, to the school. Third, there is a high dropout ratio of the students, which were, or the female students, and those female students who still excel in their schools, they do not get a chance to go in for higher education. So the policy was designed to protect the girl child. But what we actually did, the ground situation, that's where the case problem comes in. Is it a good policy, or this policy has its own challenges? And that is where your real research comes in. And that is where I'm talking about moving from the case, moving deeper into the research problem. So the research which we recommended, go and really see the field work, see to it what is happening, and that's the where the government of India structure of how we implement government policies, and moving on to the tehsil level, speaking to stakeholders, speaking to NGOs, speaking to the self-help groups, started there. And it was a complete research, because here every individual that we were reaching out has to be, I mean, we had to have some right type of questions to be asked, so that we could understand the real crux of the problem. Because what we are trying to do with the case is come up with some kind of alternative solutions to a challenging management problem. So this is where your case shifts just from just being a teaching case to something which is more of a research case. When you go into a real life situation, research about all of these things, and research doesn't really mean that going into the textbooks. No, going into the real life challenges which over there. The case here is who are the people who are affected by it. So we moved on to a deeper level, where we had understood the research problem. The research problem came out to be something where the idea or the objective of the policy was correct, but the problem was where have we really implemented it well. Now, in implementation, there were n number of questions which started emerging, and we started to gain a knowledge about it, and that's why the groundwork happened. And by the time the faculty did the complete groundwork, and then by the time she wrote the case, generally, in case there are two parts in a case that we write. One is the case itself, and the second is the teaching note. Generally, a lot of these learnings that we have actually get converted or get reflected into the teaching note segment, because in the case we are actually highlighting the problems which my student would be tackling into the classroom. And that is why our case has to be so in depth, or has to have so much of data point where some kind of discussions or problem identification can happen. The way we understand, and that is where our first, as a faculty member, we need to understand the situation, and then come up with what a clear a rough note document about a case. From the rough document, we would then pull out two sections of the case. One is the case main body, and second is the teaching note. Teaching note would have answers to all the questions or the issues which are raised into the case. Teaching note is something for a faculty, not for a student. Teaching note is for a faculty to really go back and see to it what they wanted to teach, understand what were the things there, a lot of information which we don't want to explicitly say to the student, but we want them to discuss, are all things which we write into a case study. And this is into a teaching note, and that is how we try to really make a case which becomes a very strong research based case. And when you are finished with writing of a case, your case generally goes to a reviewer who might be a great scholar in his area, a great learned professor into that area, and he would do a very good review. And review is also a very strong point when you learn a lot of things. You learn how your mistakes, you learn how where all you did wrong. So the case writing case is a very different ball game as compared to writing up a research paper. I would in another few minutes I would be spending on to the research paper, because I think I have got another half an hour or so to really complete the discussion. So I would move on very quickly onto the research paper also. But here I wanted to make you understand that you can, as a faculty member, you can have two type of publication. Then you can think about writing of cases. That is a new trend into research side, where you can write a very good teaching case, or you can write a very good research case. Second is where you're writing up the article. And this is where I thought that maybe the opportunity which Dr. Podar shared with me when he talked about the research, emerging research trends, and wanted me to speak. I thought he has been, Dr. Ajay Pudar had been my old colleague, and thank you, Ajay ji, for inviting me here. So when you invited me here, I thought that probably I would try to make this whole session, which would be little more valuable to the faculty members from their own journey as a faculty member and excelling into that journey. So this is where I thought that I would also share. I would very quickly share what we do at IMA, and maybe some of you might really want to avail our opportunities. So what we have done at we have set up a complete research center, which is a India Case Research Center. And when we are doing this India Case Research Center, when we had set up this India Case Research Center, we had done with a very very clear understanding that this would be a center where we help faculties grow with us. So this center is completely devoted to developing research cases, teaching cases in India. We have a complete set of people, top people from industry supporting us into this process. Idea is to develop cases which are more, which bring more practical insight into management teaching by establishing industry academia linkage, which was always been criticized or always very weak with most of the institution. So when you start writing cases, this is an opportunity where you can get an entry to the industry. And generally now, the a few years ago, this was not the scenario, but yes, people have started understanding the importance that industry and academia should be meeting each other. And this is where IMA comes into picture with its whole network of people. We help out to reach out the industry people and try to bring out the real issues on which the cases need to be written, cases which are pertaining to Indian corporates, cases which are pertaining to Indian situation. A lot of us have been teaching up cases which are generally written into a different context, maybe into different geographies, or maybe cases which are Harvard type of cases, which are very, very difficult for our average Indian student to understand. And maybe a lot of time they might understand the language, but they do not understand the issues and the problems. So issues and problem of Nike in US would be very different from Nike in India. Who cares in India as to how this shoe was made? We are not bothered whether it was made into a sweatshop or something else, because 80% of Indian products are made in a sweatshop. But when it comes to Nike in US, they need to be very very careful about the human rights, the child right, and the way the product was being made. So they would have their own sanctions around it. So the same company, same organizations case may not, our Indian student may not be able to relate. And that is why we started writing up cases. We built up the center to write cases which are India centric cases, and we have been trying to connect industry and academia together. We here in at our center, when we take people on board to write cases, we give them a complete know-how how to write a case and help them to ultimately publish the cases with India Case Research Center. Once you have done this particular activity, you will have so much of learning that you can go to at any level if you have right type of motivation. So this is what we do. We do a lot of webinars, we do a lot of conferences around it. And right now this is an opportunity where some of you who are already writing cases can really be part of our second case writing competition and conference, which we are doing in an online mode in 24th and 25th March. And this is an opportunity for typically the youngsters to really be part of a competition, which is a very very high quality competition, because we have got very good set of reviewers and a lot of advisors who come and share their experiences. My pre-conference webinar which we did was something where I had an opportunity to have best of the people into this field, Panch Vibhushan, Dr. B.M. Atraya, Professor Krishna Dheer from Berry College, Dr. Kamlesh Mishra, all joining us into this particular session. So this is a very very rewarding journey, and this competition is, as it is a competition, it has got very very attractive prizes also. So maybe if some of you are interested into really looking into it and writing cases, please do contribute your cases here, because now the academic field has is open to all practitioners and academicians. A lot of you might be coming from industry, you already have some idea about case situations, and you would want to share those here at this platform. So probably this is the time for you to really look into these case studies and probably start your journey with us. And just 1 second, give me 1 second, and I'll just be back before I move on to the research part of it. So thank you all. This is where I thought I would share, and I since I had huge number of people who have joined us today into this webinar, I thought that probably this would be a very good opportunity to share this information with all of you. You can always visit our websites and get up the details. I hope you are able to hear me.
Yes, ma'am, you are very much able to audible. Yeah, thanks a lot for your input. Yeah.
So I think Shobna, I have a few more minutes, or should I really, I mean, go on, or the research part of it, or should I close down?
You may share for another time also. It's your wish. Yeah.
Okay. So very quickly, I'll since this is an opportunity which I'm sure a lot. I'm very thankful for the opportunity. I would just very quickly tell you these people who have joined us may have another set of interest, which is typically a interest into their research side, where they want to write contribute papers and want to write for the journals and others. So this is something which we generally do into our journey as a faculty member. I would very quickly talk about as to I'm sure this is something which you have already done in your PhDs, and you have done you have written a lot of something which is related to maybe very deeper research, which was your research area into when you were doing up your PhDs, and might have also contributed into writing up for various other research papers into various journal. So, as we talk about the trends in research, the general takeaway or the major things which have now been we see foresee a change is that there are when we look into research process remains the same, but it is very important to identify what are the topics that we want to take and what is the journey that we would be taking up into the research. So probably identification of our topic is something which is very critical. For those who are doing a PhD, of course, this is very critical because they have to make sure that they actually end up reaching up their end goal, which is getting a PhD degree awarded, which is generally a very tedious journey. May take some people 2 years, but most of them would average take around 4 to 5 years to complete and earn a degree, which they very effectively defended and earned it. But a lot of us we would also like to do research beyond the PhD programs. So you might have a lot of you who have joined us today would have really done their PhD and now looking for what else can we research about. So this is the time where we take a altogether very different journey, because our motivation is not to complete PhD. Our motivation is to make use of all the learning that we had in our PhD to write very good papers which are published in very good journal. So I'm sure I could see the calendar of activity, the FDP. a lot of things have been talked about publication. I would try to really focus on something which is the topic of the research, and probably also what is what good journals are now prescribing. So when we talk about research topic, it is very very important that we choose something when we are looking from a research perspective, and typically post PhD, something which is very in motivating for you, and also is able to bring out some level of outcomes which have till now not been reached. Because I mean, when we look into what is happening into Indian research publications, most of our publications are targeted to complete PhD, and in this process publish couple of papers. And that time we are, our motivations are very different. But when you look into the real problems which we would like to really research on after our PhD or into our post doc, is where the real issue comes in. So recently we were looking into some of the research has been done by industry does a lot of research into these areas. In these might be related to various discipline, but probably sustainability, environment, governance, the ESG, which is now the incoming thing for most of the corporates. Most of the corporate have realized that probably in coming few years, they all would be graded or rather rated or by these three parameters. It is important that we start looking into that. Can we really have some kind of research paper around it? Can we really look into these problems which are actually the real life or real uh, big business problems which needs to be understood, and probably we need to have solutions which companies can implement. So this is where my stakeholder or my person who would be implementing the solution is the organization in itself. And that is why the real issues, no, the topic of our research problem should be identified from a very very different perspective, not just from academic perspective, but from what the managerial perspective, as to what the managerial implications would be. This can not only be these ESGs, but can also be thinking about into the lines as to when we are talking about a lot of things like AI, we are talking about ML, we are talking about a lot of technological interventions. But what is the technology? Where are we really going to use of these technologies? For what type of functions? Have we really researched on it? Industry is already into it. Industry may not have published a research paper around it, but industry is already into it. And this is the time where we really should be really looking into understanding where exactly is the application of all these theoretical concepts, which are new emerging concept in our curriculum, and probably new courses that we are launching. Where exactly would these be applied, and how they would be applied, what type of problems they would be solving? If we are talking about automation or we are talking about AI, what type of problem it would be solving? And to implement that particular to solve that particular problem, what are the technologies or what are the concepts which we would be using? And probably this is where a lot of industry academia linkages would start working for you. At the same time, when we look into, a lot of time your research may actually give a very very broader application, or maybe very specific applications to the organizations. So when I say broader applications, maybe when I'm researching onto where exactly is the industry using up AI or using up ML, these are two very simple problem statement as such, to identify, and I'm just doing an exploratory research to understand what where are people using it. But when I do, after my exploratory research, when I go in deeper into it, I start getting up the real technologies which are used, and technology used into what type of application. That is where I am able to really come up with some kind of more descriptive, and I'm going looking into the prescriptive type of research, where I know that if this is a problem, probably this is a solution, this is the technology you should be implementing. And once I publish this research paper, this kind of research paper, it would be valuable not only for industry but also from an academic perspective. Industry, of course, would understand that if we are facing up this type of problem, these are the solutions which are already there, or we can look into these type of solutions there. But from an academic perspective, what I would bring on board is I would be able to identify that what I should be teaching into these courses. If I am designing a course into AI or ML, what type of things I should be teaching into this course? Is my curriculum really covering it? These are the things where these are the technologies which should have broader application. What are the industry which would be using of these application? How are they being going to implement it on it? How many job roles are going to get affected by it? So those are the research problems which would have a very strong educational impact, very strong social impact also. So probably a lot of you who are postdoctorate can really think about looking into these issues there. And probably that's the another before I end up my session, I would always say that at IMA we get lot of opportunity to evaluate lot of research proposals which have been submitted by various organizations. At the same time, a lot of PhD scholars research thesis come to me. On an individual basis, what I have found is most of the time, the students which we are addressing, a lot of time they do not really know what they are researching for. A lot of time there is a very little clarity as to what should my research design. Those This is something which we always say when we are doing up the synopsis. At the synopsis stage, we always say that this is something which should we would be doing, or this is something which you should be knowing about it. But what we have found is that most of the time our students, even I mean the best of our students, as far as their research design and other things are concerned, they lack about it. And why they lack? Because probably we have again here the challenges that we have taught all of these concepts, whether it is a chi-square test or a ANOVA or a regression. We have taught a lot of them through some of the data sets, and we have talked about it as a test, but not as to how this test where all to be applied, how it comes into my research framework. That is why we always recommend that when you are writing up any research paper, when you're taking up this journey, very very important, you set out your goals. What is your research framework? Spend time on it, maybe 1 month, 2 months, but spend time on your research framework. If you haven't understood your sample, if you haven't understood the sampling framework, if you haven't understood your key research questions, if you have not understood how these key research questions are going to build a construct around it, if you haven't understood your construct, what is this construct going to give you into the overall implementation, this PhD or this research would always have its own lacunas. And why a lot of research papers fail to make its mark? Because we haven't really thought about the comprehensive framework. This is something which we believe would automatically come. No, this would not come unless and until we have thought about it. Every research question that we have put in should would always be tested. So what type of test are we really going to apply to it? This is something which is very important for us, because unless and until we know what type of test we are going to apply, we would never be putting up the research question, or when we are designing the questionnaire, we would not be using up the right type of scaling there. So now, if I have to use ANOVA, the research question that I have put in has to get answers into a particular type of scale. If I am using factor analysis, I'm trying to use factor analysis in my research, then then I should be very clear what type of scale I should be using. If I am doing something like a chi-square test and testing on demographics, then probably I should be very clear what type of scaling I would be using. So these concepts, though we teach all of these concepts in our first paper when somebody enters into the research side, but still we find most of the people are still not clear as to what is the application for all of these. And that is why we say, think about your research framework well. think about what we want to research. From the construct, your research questions, from research questions, your questionnaire designing, the for the scale that you would be using, that all needs to be aligned together. So and this is where most of the thesis or most of the research papers are rejected. Why? Because this framework is not clear with most of the people. So this is what we always suggest, and I myself, when I'm guiding up people into the PhD research, I always suggest that spend time on it, understand your research problem, what do you want to research, and what is the implication of research is one part of it. Once we have understood that this has got a wider implication, it makes sense to do a research. It makes sense to spend another 2 months, 3 months, or maybe 2 years, 3 years. If I'm doing a PhD on it, this topic has enough of the meat in it and probably has got larger implication for the society, for the business houses, for or and for the academic people. Then it makes sense to go for this type of research, and then spend time on your research framework. If these fundamentals are very clear, your research would always be a very smooth sailing thing. So I thought I would share my mindset that I have regarding this to you, audience. I hope you could make some sense into what I have talked about. Because I am one of the faculty from your core group. I'm sure most of you are very, very learned people who have joined us today. Uh, I'm not very sure. I mean, if I were able to make some sense, some impact. If I was able to make some sense, some impact to you, please drop in a yes there, so that I can really see, evaluate myself if I made up a mark there. And with that, thank you, Dr. Ajay Podar, and thank you, Dean Madam, for allowing me to be here, inviting me to be here. I think uh, we are now heading towards the closure of the session. So, my big thank you to all of you, and thank you, participants, for your interactions.
Thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful session. Hope our like when all the participants get the knowledge of the evolving trend in research. A beautiful topic under this. Thanks a lot for the same.
Uh, Thank you, ma'am. This is Ajay Poddar. I just wanted to have one question from you on behalf of our faculty and participant that we have discussed about, and I know that IMA was doing students games, management games, student management games, SMG. So I wanted to have 2-3 minutes of yours to little bit give the light on that how faculty can manage and how the students can get the learning through that. Over to you,
Uh,
ma'am.
Right. Thank you, Ajayji. I think when you were at IMA, we were doing a a game called Chanakya.
Yeah.
That is basically a management game which is designed around the designing up strategies around management. And generally, the way that we conduct these games, we are still conducting this game. The format has also, of course, changed, because now we conduct it into both offline and online mode. So generally, we have created a biz lab around it. So biz lab is where we have lot of management games, and generally in each of these games, what we actually give is information about an organization, or an information about the competing organization. Then we put up a management challenge which an organization would be facing. We give up all the indicators which are related to the organization. So all the brand, the products, the sale of the products, the turnover, the profit, the gross margin, the competition, everything is put in. All the financials and the marketing details are put in into the system. And student has been now given an opportunity to build up scenarios as to what type of managerial decisions he would be taking. So the on the basis of managerial decisions, he has been given task in for 4 quarters in 1 year. This is how you can really take up to organization. So generally a student does a task and looks into quarter 1 implementation and the results, quarter 2 implementation and the result. End of the day, students generally they participate individually or they participate in team. They're able to figure out what they implemented and what were the end results. So most of the time this journey is a very learning journey for a student. Why? Because he is able to see whether whatever he talked about, whatever he thought was correct or incorrect. And maybe there, since this is again a team game, so you there would be other teams which would be competing with you onto the same situation, and you would get an understanding as to who is a winner, and there would be very detailed feedbacks given there, that this worked for this organization, this worked for this organization. So the management games that we do at IMA are now the simulation games, as we call it. So we simulate a situation and ask the students to really go through it. We have an opportunity here where a student from your institution or any other institution can join in bulk. They can be divided into team and they can be taken through maybe a 1 month or 2 months process to really go through the games. And this is something which would be very engaging for them, because they are able to apply all the management concepts which they have been taught. Ideally a student in a second year of management is something where this game becomes very relevant to them. This has also been very relevant with why corporates. I'm sure when you were there, we were doing it with corporates there.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, ma'am, that you have put a light on that, because in many part of our country, people are not knowing about the simulator or the games, how they can get the learning through that, and that will be the actual practical knowledge what the student can achieve. So with that, I am very thankful, and officially from the Home Sterling Global University, we are giving you the extending our heartful thanks that you have taken the time from your busy schedule and given us the expert lecture on that. And the comments what I was seeing, those are very encourageable, and those are very encouraging. I am happy that our faculty and students have learned many things, and I believe that in the coming year, coming days also, we will be having some association, so that such kind of knowledge and expertise can be extended to the faculty and the new budding professional. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Ajayji. Thank you, Shobna.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
ma'am.
and thank you all the participants. Have a great day.